The Aserai Palace Guard is the tier 5 shock trooper of the Aserai. With a big and mean axe and a few throwables, the role of this unit is simple: kill other infantry. In order to be effective against infantry, all this unit will need is a good weapon, good enough armor, and someone who tanks the projectiles for them. The most iconic piece of equipment the Palace Guard brings is the Executioner Axe. Unfortunately, it's not the heavy version. This one instead has roughly 20 less length and 10 less damage. Regardless of this weapon is still pretty beastly. It comes with a base damage of 123, more than enough to destroy low tiers. It has 115 length, which is good for an axe. The longer the weapon, the more the unit can benefit from the natural cleave effect. As all of the axes, it delivers extra damage to shields, but the speed is unfortunately pretty slow, with a value of just 78, making it 9 points lower than the heroic Lion Breaker. Overall, the weapon is good, but picking up the swing speed bonuses is recommended if you plan to be the captain of the infantry. The utility slot of the Palace Guard is one set of Tribesmen throwing axes that brings a base 70 damage but just a stack of 3. Good for utility, but don't expect these ones to make a big difference. Talking about the armor, the Palace Guard has 29 body armor, combined between the Southern Decorated Chainmail and the Brass Scale Pauldrons. With a value this low, it's unsurprising the Palace Guard ranked last in the category among shock troops. On the bright side though, the Palace Guard brings 52 head armor, thanks to one of the best helmets in the game, the Closed Steel Cap. This will place the unit just 1 point away from first place. When it comes to the combined value of head plus body, the Palace Guard ranks 4th, but gains 1 spot to number 3 when we consider all armor types. Now that we are done with the equipment, let's get down to the stats. When considering all tests, the Palace Guard ranked in 2nd place with 1 first place, 1 second place and 2 third places. Finished with a KD of 3.31, placing them 3rd, ended up losing 813 units out of 3,500 or roughly 23.2%, placing them 3rd, ended up with a casualty chance versus low tiers of 4.12%, placing them 1st. Ended up with a KD versus low of 115.44, placing them 2nd, and ended the careers of 2,693 custom battle soldiers. With all of these out of the way, let's list the pros and cons. The unit is good in all kinds of situations at doing its job: kill infantry. Their weapon is low, but it's an hard-hitting axe, so a minor downside. They only bring 3 projectiles, making them not that impactful, but still receive the versatility pro. Their armor is polarizing, with a very good helmet but crappy body armor. They work very well when paired with the Aserai Vets, and they are exceptional at slaughtering low tiers. So expect these guys to rock in sieges and at fighting swarms of crappy infantrymen. This unit is fairly good, but has some downsides here and there. Fortunately, some of them can be fixed with perks that we might pick up anyway along the line. So my final score is a 4.5 out of 5. It's a solid unit that synergizes very well in an Aserai army, but brings a lot of weight even in a mixed one. The Aserai Veteran is the only tier 5 main infantryman of the Aserai. It is renowned across the community for being one of the worst shielded infantry melee performers. But does this unit really deserve that title, or is it just misunderstood? The Aserai Veteran is one of those hybrid infantry units who take on both the tanking and skirmishing duties. Similarly to the wildlings, the veterans bring a shield, a sword, but just one set of javelins, preferring a spear over an extra set of throwables. The most iconic piece of equipment of this unit is in my opinion the shield. It's a big one, looks cool, has a respectable 360 HP and protects most of the unit with a length value of 110. All of these aspects make for a great option at tanking incoming projectiles of any kind, and even when an arrow makes it through, the Aserai Veteran brings some impressive values of armor. The Aserai Veteran has 52 head armor, brought by the Closed Steel Cap, the best average out of all shielded infantry units. When talking about the body armor, the Veteran brings a value of 62, combined between the light lamellar armor and the bronze scale shoulders. This will place the Veteran tied in 3rd place. When we consider head plus body, the Veterans rank 2nd, missing 1st place just by 1 point, but falls 1 place to 3rd when we consider all armor types. Going back to the main weapon, the veteran brings a fine steel long cascara. It brings a very high 78 base damage, it has 116 length, making it a very long one for infantry units. And worst of all, it has a base speed of 79. The worst out of all infantry units. This weapon is honestly one of the worst an infantryman can have. The speed makes it too hard to swing faster than your opponent, and the length will make this weapon bounce more than a basketball. But despite all of these, patch 1.8 armor buff had a significant impact on this unit. There is a mechanic in the game that allows a unit to not be staggered by an incoming attack if their armor value absorbs enough of the incoming damage. And in the case of the veteran, they happen to have one of the best armor set out there. This means that this unit smashes low tiers like they are mashed potatoes. So at the end of the day, the fine steel long cascara is a crappy weapon, but the Aserai veteran makes it work. Also, as a silver lining, this unit always had 161 ended instead of 130. But I don't think it's impacting much there. Going forward, the veteran also brings one set of horseman javelins. They have 89 damage and a stack of 5. These jabs are way worse than the Battanian ones, but a unit with throwballs it's always good for versatility. Next up, the veteran brings a fine steel leaf spear, with a base thrust damage of 37, a speed of 84 and a length of 179. I'm not the kind of player that values spears highly, rather I prefer these guys to not have one, but it's an okay one. It's not too long and decently fast. Looking about the stats, the Aserai veteran ranked in first place with 2 second places and 2 first places. The veteran finished with a total KD of 5.41, placing them second, ended up losing 477 units out of 3,500 or roughly 13.5%, placing them second. Finished with a KD versus low tiers of 331.1, placing them first by more than 60 points. Ended up with a casualty chance versus low tiers of 0.2%, placing them first. And ended the careers of 2,582 custom battle soldiers. There are a few downsides to this unit, but many upsides. So let's go ahead and list them. The armor is one of the best you can get. The shield is excellent for tanking incoming fire. The versatility is a strong pro with this unit with the 5 javelins. The melee performance is one of the best you can get against all tiers but tier 5. They struggle a lot versus tier 5 units, but fortunately you aren't going to encounter many of them. They just destroy low tiers, making them extremely good sieging units. But the weapon is bad. The Aserai veteran has always been one of my favorite units to play with. I think they have always been a good option, and people are just too focused on how bad they are against high tiers while not evaluating the importance of performance versus low tiers enough. This is one of the few tier 5 units in the game that does all of what you ask it to do and brings all you need to win a battle. And as a result, it's one of the few tier 5 units that deserve a 5 out of 5. There are some situations where this unit does underperform, so I don't think an OP score is justified. The Master Archer is one of the 2 range options of the Aserai, and it used to be one of the best foot archers in the game before 1.7. But are things any different now, after the changes? Let's find out. The role of the Master Archer is quite simple: point, shoot and kill. But avoid melee engagements. For archers, I think the first thing to cover is the number of arrows one can bring. In the case of the Master Archer, it's 2 quivers of piercing arrows, carrying 23 arrows each, for a total of 46 shots. This value is about average for tier 5 archers. The bow is a step recurve bow. It has 89 reload speed, it brings 62 pierce damage, and the accuracy is 94. All of the above values are also improved by the Master Archer bow skill of 160, 20 points higher than the average for tier 5 archers. When engaging in melee, the Master Archer brings a slight reach flisser. It has 85 swing speed, pretty slow for melee, 72 damage, and it's on the long side for a sidearm with 115 length. This weapon is honestly quite bad, as pretty much all sub 90 swing speed weapons tend to be. Like the Aserai veteran, the only way to make a bad weapon work is by bringing insane levels of armor. So let's talk about just that. Talking about the armor, the Master Archer has 34 body armor, combined between the Gambison over mail armor and a leather shoulder guard, ranking him tied at 3rd among archers. Differently from the rest of the Aserai infantry, the Master Archer brings the worst helmet an archer can bring, with a value of just 32 brought by the pointed skull cap over Gambeson. This will rank the Master Archer in last place among archers. When it comes to the combined value of head plus body, the Master Archer ranks last with a value of 66, but gains 2 places to number 5 when we consider all armor types. When considering the shooting efficiency, the Master Archer finished 4th with 2 3rd places and 2 4th places. They ended up with a KD of 7.91 and a KD of 231.49 versus low tiers. The Master Archers lost 44.33% of units, and their average casualty chance against low tiers was 17.17%. When considering efficiency under pressure, the Master Archers finished last with 3 7th places and 1 6th place, with an average KD of 1.72 and a KD versus low of 10.23. The Master Archers lost 66.8% of units and ended with an average casualty chance versus low tiers of 49%. And finally, when considering the melee efficiency, the Master Archers ranked 6th with an average KD of 1.66 and a KD versus low of 4.9. The Master Archers ended up losing 42.34% of their units and averaged a 24.8% casualty chance versus low tiers. This unit is all over the place when it comes to the data, but let's go ahead and list the pros and cons. This unit has a terrible helmet, but the body armor is fine for an archer. The sidearm is bad. The combination of the terrible helmet and the bad sidearm makes this unit bad in melee. Even on the shooting side of things, this unit ranks in the middle. They can't handle under pressure. On the positive, they have a base 160 bow skill that can be improved to 180 with Captain perks. My final score is a 2.5 out of 5. It's an okay unit just because it's an archer, but doesn't excel in anything, and it's quite bad in a lot of critical things. The shooting efficiency is middle of the pack, making most of the range options you find along the way better than these guys. Patch 1.7 really handicapped them, as they used to be my favorite tier 5 archer. The Aserai Vanguard Faris is the only cavalry option of the Aserai, and it has the reputation of being one of the most dangerous troops to encounter. Not only that, but this unit is the peak of the Aserai noble line. Those units reach 1 tier higher than standard troops and can only be recruited in castle villages. Other than that, they tend to generally have better gear than standard troops and way better weapon skills. The Vanguard Faris brings 171 ended, 40 more points than standard, 200 polearm, 70 more points than standard, 140 throwing, about average, and 170 riding, 40 more points than most tier 5. As you might know by this point, cavalry in this game doesn't have it easy. As long as you play on Bannerlord difficulty, most cavalry units tend to be less main carries, and instead they cover a more support / technical role. The Faris role is in fact not the kind that charges the enemy, but instead they use their 5 javelins to social distancing from the enemy and kill them from a safer distance. Units like these haven't been too good for basically any patch, but after 1.8 they buffed the throwing AI. All of these units receive significant buffs. For cavalry, I think the first thing to cover is not their lance but their general armor instead. In the case of the Vanguard Faris, it brings an abysmal 37 head armor brought by the cheapest of Aserai merchant, the pointed skull cap over mail coif. Unfortunately, despite their noble troop status, this will rank the Vanguard Faris in 8th position among cavalry units. The body armor instead is a very good 65 combined between the luxury scale armor and the reinforced scale pauldrons. This will be enough to rank the Vanguard Faris in 3rd place among cavalry. When it comes to the horse and barding, the Faris brings a combined value of just 158, combined between the Aserai horse and the reinforced half plate barding. This will rank the Faris in 8th position among cavalry. The thing about these guys is that they have good barding, but the horse is, well, crap. The horse is good for racing, but not that great for fighting. Speed works in both directions. Yes, it will improve the javelin damage, damage and the lance, but it will also improve the damage taken by the rider and the horse from projectiles and lances, making it a double-edged sword. And it will also reduce the margin of error for thrust attacks, which will make the lance miss more than necessary. When considering head plus body, the Faris ranks 5th with a value of 102, but loses 1 position when we consider all armor types. With the armor out of the way, let's talk about the equipment. The main weapon of the Faris is the Mamluk lance. It has 85 thrust speed, making it one of the fastest spear for cavalry. The length is 170, a bit too short, but the speed makes up for it. The base damage is 36, and it can couch too. Overall, no a bad option. Possibly one of the best for cavalry AI, but this unit is still going to struggle in melee due to their innate horse speed. When building captains, I recommend selecting thrust speed perks and avoid riding skill increase perks like Nimble Steed. Trust me, the last thing these guys need is more horse speed. Since we're talking about projectiles, let's quickly cover the shield. The Faris brings an ornate adarga. It has 420 HP by a length of just 60. So if you thought the Battanian Horseman was bad at tanking incoming fire, then these guys are going to be even worse. For close quarter combat, the Faris brings a fine steel long cascara. It's the same as the veteran infantryman. And if you watch that video, you know I talk about how bad this weapon actually is, but despite that, how the veteran made it work. Well, in this case, it's the opposite. The Faris doesn't have enough armor to make it work, and instead ends up being the worst in melee out of all of the noble cavalry units, and just an average performer when we consider all other cavalry units. Going forward, we have possibly the most important piece of equipment of this unit, a set of Jarids. These bad boys bring a base damage of 121 and a stack of 5. Best skirmishing option a unit can get, and they do have quite an impact on the battlefield too. Now that we are done with the equipment, let's get down to the stats. When considering the efficiency versus archers, the Faris finished 3rd with 2 second places and 2 4th places. They finished with a KD of 7.33 and a KD of 93.19 versus low tiers. The Faris lost 12.38% of units, and their average casualty chance against low tiers was 2%. When considering efficiency against spearmen, the Faris once again ranked 3rd, with an average KD of 8.28 and a KD versus low of 241.73. The Faris lost 10.95% of units and ended with an average casualty chance versus low of 0.27%. And finally, when considering the melee efficiency, the Faris ranked 6th, with an average KD of 4.57 and a KD versus low of 59.67. The Faris ended up losing 31.86% of their units, and average a 2.72% casualty chance versus low tiers. The data looks promising outside of the melee efficiency, but let's go ahead and list the pros and cons. Their helmet is bad, not just for a tier 6 unit, but for a top tier unit as well. Their body armor on the other side is very good. The horse has a low HP value and honestly carries a bit too much speed for my liking, but the barding is very good, and the extra damage delivered by the Jarids is also quite nice. Talking about the Jarids, they do make the unit very versatile. The sidearm is quite bad, and when we take into consideration the low head armor, it makes this unit quite bad in melee. The shield is very tiny, allowing for many projectiles to hit the Faris. They get the extra survivability for being tier 6. My final score is a 4.5 out of 5. This unit is quite good, and outside of the head armor and the shield, it's very well protected. They can lance effectively enough, but the real strength is their throwables. 5 Jarids can one-shot most troops in 1.8, and this unit is great both offensively and defensively. All you need to do is find a way to flank your opponent and impale them. But that also means it's going to be one of the toughest units to face. Be very aware of these guys the next time you encounter an Aserai army with a lot of cavalry. Tier 4, Tier 5, Tier 6, doesn't matter, you should always be aware. The Aserai Mamluk Heavy Cavalry is the horse archer option for our favorite Dates Merchant faction. This troop is quite unique for the class, as in comparison to the other horse archers, it only brings 1 quiver of arrows, trading the second one for a shield. As the unique equipment may suggest, these guys won't last more than 5 minutes, and they will likely need to use their long blade and their protective layer preemptively. Unlike the Crusades, who seem to be fine without using any form of protection whatsoever. The role of this troop is not only to flank the opponent, but also to engage in mounted combat if necessary. Let's start by talking about the arrows. The Mamluk will bring just one quiver of piercing arrows, for a total of 23 arrows. Why is that such a low number of arrows, you ask? Well, we know the Aserai took cheap power on their cavalry units, the Faris got a bad helmet, and these guys get no arrows. Ankit must find a way to save more money for his next project, I guess. When it comes to the bow, the Mamluk bring the step recurve bow. It has 89 speed and 62 base damage. Not much to say about this one, it's literally the same bow as any other horse archer. For protection, the Mamluk brings a large darga. It has 370 HP and a length of 60. So much for being large, isn't it? These guys will barely be able to protect their faces with this, don't expect much from it. The sidearm of the Mamluk is the good old fine long steel Cascara. It has 79 speed, 78 base damage, and a length of 116. As I already explained in the Faris and Veteran video, this weapon is quite bad, and in order to work it needs a very good armor value. These guys don't have enough armor to make it work, but thanks to the shield, they are still the second best horse archer in melee. Talking about the armor, the Mamluk has 46 head armor, brought by the Emir helmet. This will rank the Mamluk in second place among horse archers and 18th out of 34 overall. The Mamluk also brings 36 body armor brought by the stitched leather over mail. This will rank the unit in last place among horse archers and 25th overall. When it comes to the horse and barding, the Mamluk rides an Aserai horse protected by the chain mail horse armor. With 55 horse armor, this ranks the unit in first place among horse archers. When considering head plus body, the Mamluk ranks third with value of 82, and gains one position to second when considering all armor types. With the equipment and armor out of the way, let's talk about the stats. When considering the efficiency against archers, the Mamluk finished second. They finished with a KD of 58.32 and a KD of 241.2 versus low tiers. The Mamluks lost 1.62% of their units and averaged a casualty chance against low tiers of just 0.4%. When considering efficiency against infantry, the Mamluks ranked tied at third with 2 third places and 2 fourth places, with an average KD of 3.87 and a KD versus low of 186.1. The Mamluks lost 23.05% of their units and ended with an average casualty chance against low tiers of 3.33%. And finally, when considering the melee efficiency, the Mamluks ranked second with an average KD of 4.18 and a KD versus low of 22.81. The Mamluks ended up losing 19.89% of their units and averaged a 6.64% casualty chance versus low tiers. It's hard to evaluate horse archers as there are just 4 units of them, but let's go ahead and list the pros and cons. The one quiver is the most obvious downside, and the number of arrows in the quiver is also quite low. Due to that, it makes this unit more of an hybrid than cavalry or horse archer specific. Their horse armor is fantastic and it makes the Aserai horse quite tanking despite the 200 HP. I rarely saw them getting killed because their horse died. Thanks to the speed of the horse, they can reposition fast, allowing for reliable flanking of the enemy. For being horse archers, they are very serviceable in melee, making them pretty good in sieges. The sidearm is unfortunately quite bad, and like the Faris, the armor doesn't help it enough to make it good. The head armor is good, but a sack of potatoes will likely make for better body protection. The shield is pretty bad, but it's unlikely you are going to use them for tanking projectiles. My final score is a 1.5 out of 5. It's quite clear that this unit is quite unique and inferior in comparison to the other horse archers. But if you really want to have that flanking playstyle for your Aserai armies, then it does find a purpose. Anyway, let me know what you guys think and what troop you want me to cover next. Right now I have one request for Sturgia and one for Vlandia. If you want to make sure I cover the faction you care about, leave a comment below. And if you are one of the 88% of people who aren't subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. I am trying my best to reach 1000 subs right now and we are 40% of the way there. This will not only tell me that my job is appreciated by a large part of the player base, but it will also give me the possibility of making videos faster and more frequently. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.